Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's digital engagement training titled Equitable Facilitation Technique. My name is Alan Kafle and I am the Multicultural Outreach Manager at ECOS. We are the sub-consultant for the King County Waste Treatment Division's Clean Water Plan. This is the first training of our two training sessions on digital engagement. These two training sessions are being offered to CBO partners on the Clean Water Plan to provide tools to engage virtually with your communities. We hope these tools, technique will be useful in your work, especially during COVID-19, whether it is gathering feedback for the Clean Water Plan, community organizing, or meeting other essential needs of your community. Without further delay, now I would like to invite Francis, Liz, and Sharon from Resource Media to lead today's session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. So we'll start with some introductions. My name is Francis Lee. My pronouns are they, them. I'm with Resource Media out of the Seattle office.
And I'm Liz Bonsa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also in our Seattle office, our home offices now, and I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Hi everybody, name is Sharon Huerta, she, her pronouns. I'm also based out of the Seattle office at Resource Media, and I'm the program assistant.
So welcome to all our CBO participants. Just to let you know, after this training is over, we will send over a resources list, a tip sheet, and this exact recording to you along with a feedback survey. So look out for that. Liz and I at Resource Media are also providing free individualized coaching in the weeks to come about anything we discuss about these skills and facilitation techniques. So if you want some private coaching after this training, we are available. Just reach out to us for that. So we like to start all our meetings with a land acknowledgement, and we recommend doing it for virtual meetings as well, as all of us are still physically located in a place. So we would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin from time immemorial. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Duwamish people, past and present, the Suquamish tribe, and other coastal Salish peoples for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Thank you. Okay, so the purpose of today's session is to share with you all how to facilitate equitable and inclusive virtual meetings to help you in your community engagement work. Liz and my process will be to share best practices and also specific tips, tools, and strategies. So our hoped for outcomes are that each of you will consider what has made your in-person community events effective and be able to use some of these tips and tools to increase authenticity, relationship building, and care virtually in your online meetings. So I'm going to start with a question and start engaging you all as the audience. I want you to ask yourself, what challenges have you come across when facilitating virtually, or that you anticipate when facilitating virtually? Please let us know by typing into the chat box.
And if anybody's connected by phone as well, you can just unmute yourself and connect that way. And Francis, I'll point out some of you, your chat won't be visible unless you hover your mouse over the very bottom of this entire screen for the Zoom meeting. And when you hover over it, you'll see something called chat. So if you can just answer the question as many words or as little words about challenges you have facilitating meetings that are online. Aha, so we've got one answer already, Francis, of people talking over each other, especially when they can't see, just like conference calls, same thing. And another one, how to hold space for multiple simultaneous conversations. Great, we're gonna go over these. And recovering from technical difficulties. And we'll model a lot of this throughout the meeting, how we do this, because we, like everyone, continue to have all sorts of technical difficulties as we figure out our new online world. Thank you for these. Great. Francis?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for doing that, letting us know your challenges. Oh, there's one more. One challenge I have is reading body language. When things are unsaid, vulnerability feels harder. Precisely. Yeah, so there are quite a lot of novel challenges to doing virtual meetings, and a lot of them, as you have shared, have to do with engagement, but also accessibility. So we hope that the rest of this training will try to address some of those things and mitigate that, so you can have more successful virtual meetings. So thanks everyone. That was also kind of a test to see if you could find the chat button, and you could. And so, as you know, that's another way to communicate with each other during this training. And if you have any questions throughout the training, feel free to just put them in there. But we will also pause after each section to have an open Q&A session where you can ask your questions aloud or also put them in the chat box. Just one more, I guess, like housekeeping thing is that we just want to say that it's really important to take breaks. This is a 2-hour meeting with the Q&A at the end. So take breaks. You know, we know that people are working from home full time, potentially with a tremendous amount of distractions and less ability to move around. So at any time, if you need to move around, feel free to just do so as needed. Just make sure you're muted and you turn your video off. But otherwise, thank you for keep your video on when you are engaged in this meeting. So the agenda for today is pretty simple. We're going to talk about effective meeting openers, inclusive facilitation practices, and then effective meeting closers. So the successful virtual meeting largely depends on your attendees' engagement. And a lot of y'all spoke to that when you were putting your answers in the chat box. But engagement also depends on your attendees knowing how to use the platform. So at the start of every meeting, assume that some of your attendees are brand new to this platform and take the time to introduce it to them by showing them the controls they can use to participate. So I didn't do this earlier with you, but I'm going to do it now. So for those of you who are new to Zoom, we are using Zoom video conferencing software. And the screenshot on the screen is approximately what you should be seeing as a participant, all the controls that you have. So you can, starting on the left, you can mute or unmute yourself, stop or start your video. That's what I was talking about, you know, if you need to step away. You can also look at the list of participants. You can chat everyone, or you can decide to privately chat one person. You can share your screen, which is actually what Sharon is doing now for us for these slides. You can record, which is what I started doing after getting your consent. And then if you want to, you can use reactions, which will basically put an emoji on your screen if you want to react to something without interrupting or disrupting the meeting. So now I'm going to talk about audio and video. So one of the issues that you all stated for virtual meetings was that it's hard to tell body language, or it's hard to read these more the nonverbal cues of people because they're on a flat screen. Which is why that we recommend that for small groups, maybe under 20 participants, that you do keep the video and audio on for the whole meeting if possible, as that is the virtual equivalent of eye contact. You know, if you're just talking to a blank screen, it's really impossible to know how someone is feeling or how things are landing with them or if they're even there, right? But for large groups, we do recommend just muting everyone by default to reduce interruptions. And we actually didn't do it for this meeting, but it sounds like everyone is just muting themselves as needed. So thank you for doing that. Okay, now let's talk about slides. So as you see, we had some slides for this meeting, and we will have some slides for more sections of them. So if you do decide to use slides in your meetings, we do recommend using fewer of them. That's because slides are just by default like really boring because they're static. But to make your slides more engaging, we recommend using images that will resonate emotionally with your attendees and just using as little text as possible. So we've tried to model that in our slides by putting pictures on there and just really brief bullet points of what we're talking about. So slides can also present an issue if there are people coming into the meeting in all different ways. So for example, if someone is calling in on the phone, they're just going to have audio accessible to them. They're not going to be able to see the slides, right? So if you do have slides, just make sure to read out and describe what's on each slide so that people on the phone or people who aren't seeing the slides can follow along. And verbally describing the slides is also just a really great practice to do all the time because it provides accessibility to attendees who are blind or visually impaired. So let's talk a little bit about roles. So just like in an in-person meeting, the facilitator can't do it all. You need help. So before the meeting starts, it's important to identify different people to assume different roles. Roles may include, as you can see on the slides, reading this out, the facilitator, someone managing technical support, the note taker, and the timekeeper. So it's really important to have someone for each of these. Maybe some of them you don't need, but I would say for technical support, especially when you're doing a virtual meeting, is so important because things are just gonna go wrong. There's so many different ways to use this software. There could be Wi-Fi difficulties. There could be hardware difficulties with someone's computer. You can't control it all. So as a facilitator, you need to make sure that you have someone on point to communicate and to troubleshoot with people who are having issues so that you can continue to present and share what you need to share during your meeting.
And Francis, on that note, so there's 3 of us here from Resource Media, Francis, Sharon, and me, but typically you're the only one from your organization doing it. And so often what I have done when I'm the only one from Resource Media, and sometimes there's like, we're going to have some slides showing what we need, we're going to do all these cool things during our meeting, is I ask somebody from one of the other groups to essentially co-host and support me. And so in Zoom, we'll send you how-tos afterwards, but you can promote somebody else's co-host. So for example, Sharon is a co-host, so Sharon can share the screen as well, whereas none of the rest of you are able to share your screen with us. We've just set it up that way to do that. So you can always ask other people, just like in a regular meeting in person.
Thank you, Liz, for that comment. So I'm going to pause here, and does anyone have any questions so far about what was shared earlier or comments? You can unmute yourself and speak, or just type it into the chat box.
Hi, everyone. This is Nellie from Why We. Maybe you'll get to this. Thank you so much for hosting us today. Maybe you'll get to this later, but I think, Liz, you kind of referenced this of setting, kind of even the point of setting up a meeting. I know that Zoom bombing. I don't love that term, but it is quite an aggressive thing that happens over Zoom. And I've been hearing about it happening, especially during these really difficult times. It sounds like Zoom has made some shifts to make it so that people like can't share their screens in advance. I'm not sure if it'd be helpful to walk through exactly how to set those settings so that that can't happen.
Awesome. So that's actually, Zoom bombing is the term I'm also familiar with. And as you said, there's been school boards, many, I've known one of the tribal communities here in Washington had one of their meetings recently, Zoom bombed away. And that idea is that somebody comes in and registers because maybe you've shared a link to your Zoom meeting over social media to advertise it. So it got into the public realm. It wasn't just like we did where Alan sent it to a closed group. But when you publish your Zoom link on your website for an upcoming meeting, because it's a community meeting, then you have that risk. And so Nellie, when we send the resource list afterwards, what we did after looking at, now there's a proliferation of how-to guides on how to set security settings. We used the one from the Anti-Defamation League, and it has, I think, Francis, we won't show it here just because it's, I think, 12 different steps, and it will be very hard to remember if you're very new to the Zoom settings. But one of them, like you're hinting at, Nellie, is that you only designate a couple people to share their screen. And that's one of the ways people have put hate speech up, is they've just shared their screen with an image. The other way, of course, is through their own backdrop of their, you know, how I can see all of you on video. So we'll send that how-to where you can protect that, most relevant if you publish your Zoom meeting link, etc. And don't do an approval process for each person. So great question. Very important question.
Thank you for bringing that up, Nellie. Yeah, we'll send out those resources. There's just a lot of things you can do based on the level of risk you're willing to, engage in, or how likely you think a stranger is going to join your meeting. But yeah, like Liz said, you can prevent people from sharing their screens. You can also require registration, which we did. You can only share the password with certain people. You can enable waiting rooms, so you have to manually admit people. You see their name, you see the email. If you don't know who they are, you can just kick them out. You can also kick people out of a meeting anytime as the host if they're saying something, or you can just mute them. Or there's a spectrum of security and privacy around that. And yeah, we're happy to share resources so you can figure out what works best for your organization, and so you can train other people too.
Yeah, and Francis, maybe we'll send that whole Zoom how-to.
We did another, we have another webinar about this, so we'll send over those resources.
That's a great idea. So thanks for bringing that up. Francis, I wanted to note one other thing, just in case. So Nellie, you spoke up, but I literally, after Francis asked that question, does anybody have any questions or thoughts? I was in my hands just counting out seconds, because we wanted to model when you ask a group and you're trying to keep engagement up, it's this uncomfortably long amount of time that we recommend you wait, because you can't see body language like you can in person, where, you know, it'll be clear, people don't have questions and you can move on and you read an audience that way. Online, you can't. And so we go extra long when we're talking about equitable facilitation techniques, because one thing we'll talk about later is if you have communities who have historically been oppressed, for many people, that affects their confidence levels in meetings, in speaking up, and especially in a meeting where they don't know other people. That translates directly into them waiting a long time before choosing to speak up if nobody else speaks up. And the 7 seconds also is an adaptation to meet the needs of people who are more shy and introverted. So it is what we call inside resource media an uncomfortable silence, but I think is really helpful. Francis, do you want to talk about the timekeeper, like what we usually do on that? Because Sharon, thank you. You're our timekeeper.
Yes. So as the facilitator host, you have to pay attention to so many different things and just be really present, right, when you're presenting. So it's really hard to also pay attention to time and also pace yourself. So thank you so much to Sharon, who is our timekeeper. What we've been doing is, since this meeting is, the presentation is 90 minutes long, we're asking Sharon to give us just a heads up when we've hit the 45-minute mark, to make sure that we are still on track and we can still get through all the information that we have planned for y'all here. And also, it's you know, if you don't, you could also just set a timer on your phone too as well. We've kind of seen that for virtual meetings. It is, since you aren't moving around as much, it is a little bit easier to like lose track of time when you're looking at a screen, you know, without the clock on it. But so we would recommend for longer meetings definitely having a timekeeper. Maybe 30 minutes into a 1 hour meeting, 1 hour into 2 hour meeting. Hopefully you're not in or setting meetings that are longer than 2 hours, because that's just a really long time to be in a virtual meeting. So anything else to add about that, Liz?
Yeah, you know, and I would say halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, if you're like me, you've been raised on meetings where people with 5 or 10 minutes before the close of the meeting, somebody says, we're at the 50-minute mark, or we have 5 minutes left. And then if you're not through your agenda, or you're right behind on your agenda, it doesn't give you enough time to adjust. You're pretty much at that point going, okay, we'll skip to agenda items 5 and 6 and we'll do those next time. If you do that timekeeping at the halfway mark, at the 2/3 mark, it allows the facilitator to readjust, speed up, slow down, whatever, with enough time notice. So we've slowly ratcheted backwards the timekeeper calling time so that you can adjust much earlier. That's it, Francis. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about introductions. So introductions are the first step of relationship building. If your group has already been working together, you probably don't need to do introductions. But if you're meeting for the first time, and meeting for the first time virtually, we really recommend spending the first 1 or 2 meetings getting to know each other. So let's do some practice. Let's take a moment for introductions now. And the versions of the introductions we're going to do now are give your name, your pronouns, your organization, and your access needs. And for those of you who aren't familiar with access needs, it's a term from disability justice, just talking about what are your physical or emotional or mental needs to be able to engage in this meeting, in this training. And if those needs are met, you can say they're met. You don't say that you don't have access needs, because we all have needs, right? So I'm going to model that. My name is Frances Lee. My pronouns are they, them. I'm here with Resource Media, and my access needs are that I can't sit still for a very long time. So I'll definitely be taking a break when it's time for a break. Since we have 14 people, let's just go ahead and folks unmute themselves and do some brief introductions. I'm going to put in the chat box what the introductions are. Liz, do you want to?
Yeah, and then I'll model just one other thing that we've done when you have a number of people, like even just 6 people. So it'll be essentially, I call it passing the baton because everybody waits for the next person. So Liz Bonsa, she, her. I have no access needs, but want to apologize when I'm unmuted. I have some very noisy teenagers who seem to forget 5 minutes after I say, I'm in a meeting, can you be quiet? So there will be a lot of banging in the background. Eunice, will you kindly introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Eunice Lee. I'm with King County Wastewater Treatment Division. It's really nice to see everybody today. My pronouns are she, her, and all my accessibility needs are met today. I'll pass it to Alan.
Hi again, everyone. Yeah, as I already introduced you guys, but my name is Alan, pronounced he, him, organized on ECOS. Access need, usually, it's a challenge for my community and myself. Like we have like a low bandwidth with internet services. So video quality sometimes shrink and jitters, things like that. That's the main challenge. Other is like sometimes my camera like just play with me. So I need to be careful.
Great. Derek, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Derek, interim CDA, he, him pronouns, and my access needs are met.
Great. William.
Hi everyone, name is Will, use he, him pronouns. I work with ECOS. My access needs are met, though I do apologize for the construction in the background.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth, and I work at King County Wastewater Treatment Division as well, work with Eunice, and my pronouns are she, her, and my access needs are met.
Thank you. Hoda?
Hi, my name is Hoda, she, her. I work with Living Well Can, Senior Manager of Health and Wellness. And all of my needs are met. Just heads up, I might have to walk away for a little bit because I have a puppy that's very, he gets very jealous when I'm on the phone. So I'm gonna have to walk away sometimes, but that's it.
I love it. So we'll do Tanya, and then Bridget, then Nellie, and then I'll call the next.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Guerra. I work for Living Well Kent. I'm a care coordinator in the Health and Wellness Department, and all my accessibility needs are met. Thank you.
Bonjour, good morning everyone. My name is Bridget Ray. I'm Turtle Mountain Chippewa mixed native. My pronouns are she, they. I'm with the Na'a'ilihi Fund as a strategic partnership director. And that's a change, that's a recent change. So I'm getting used to that title. And I don't have access needs right now.
Hi everyone, my name is Nellie. I use she and they pronouns, and I am from Why We, Young Women Empowered. And my access needs, similar to Francis, it's hard for me to sit still. I'm also like super sleepy today. So if I'm sleepy, I'm still also attentive and appreciate being here.
I love that. Sharon, and then Clooney, and Jocelyn.
Okay, hi everybody. Sharon Huerta. I'm with Resource Media, she, her pronouns, and all of my access needs are met today.
Hi everyone, I'm Clooney McCaffrey, she, her pronouns, and I am with ECOS, and my access needs are met today. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joycelyn Choi. I'm with ECOS, she, her pronouns, and my access needs are met today. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for those introductions. That was great. And it's good to hear a little bit more about you all and have you all hear a little bit more about each other. Just the last note on introductions. This is a smaller group, but if it was a really large group, you might not want to spend time doing letting people do individual introductions, because that could take, an hour or more. So another way to do that would just be to ask people to type in their introductions in the chat box, and then other participants could read and catch up while the presentation is going. Okay, let's move on to icebreakers. So I actually think that the most fun part of a meeting is the icebreaker. So an icebreaker is a short, easy prompt to warm up the conversation that you all are about to have. And I'm going to give you a host tip right now by having you all do icebreakers with each other, but in breakout rooms. So as a host, the way that you would create a breakout room is on your screen, you'll have some additional buttons, a couple more than the participants, and there will be a button for breakout rooms. So what I'll do is click that, and then on your screen as a participant, there will be a pop-up saying, do you want to join a breakout room? And what I'm going to do is randomly assign you all to breakout rooms. I do want to say that you can pre-assign people before a meeting. That takes a lot more prep work beforehand, but that's possible. And we can share instructions on how to do that after the fact if you want. But for now, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms so you can have small group discussions, similar to in-person meetings. So when you break out into smaller groups, you have your own table, you have your own room, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk to people in your breakout room. And the icebreaker question is, what is the history or meaning of your name? I'm going to also send that as a message to you in your breakout room so you don't have to remember it. So if everyone is ready, let's do breakout rooms. Okay, so now you all should see an option to join your breakout room, and go ahead and join that. All right, I see that some of you are done with your breakout rooms, and just letting you know, I'm going to go ahead and close all rooms. So everyone else should be coming back here in 1 minute or less.
That was really fun. We'll have more people joining us in the next 30 seconds.
Looks like we have 2 rooms that are still going.
I love that icebreaker, Francis. Thank you.
All right. Yes, it looks like everyone is back. Okay, thank you so much for participating in that icebreaker and getting a taste of what breakout rooms are like. So it probably felt different to be in the breakout room rather than this larger room, right? So just want to let you know that breakout rooms are a Zoom feature that you can use to just change up the energy of your meeting and to enable more discussion among smaller groups of people. So again, if you are new to breakout rooms and you want to learn more about how to set them up, we're happy to send you more information after this training. So that was one type of icebreaker, and it was I don't know, it's pretty vulnerable, right? You shared something meaningful and personal about yourself to someone else to try to build that connection. And this is a training where we're all here, we want to be here, but there might be a meeting where it might not be as peaceful or, or relaxing, right? So for example, if this was going to be actually a controversy-ridden meeting, you might want to get at what might be some shared core values so that you can set up some common ground. And Liz, can you share a story about this for us?
Yeah, I think I will actually share one around a group that's not in King County, but region wide. You know, there's dozens and dozens of different salmon recovery groups, and they have typically people that come from many different backgrounds. You know, there's the traditional conservation group, there's government officials, there's state and federal government officials, there's tribal sovereign nations, commercial fishermen, sport fishermen, like you get the picture, loggers, the whole bit. And many of these, it's no secret, have a lot of controversy in the meetings and arguments over how to recover salmon without hurting individual stakeholders' livelihoods and so forth. And I was brought in to facilitate a group that was having a lot of trouble working towards solutions and a lot of hostility. And you know, I got all these calls like, so-and-so, I just need you to know before the meeting is like blah, blah, blah. And then so-and-so would call me, so-and-so is like this. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this? And I really thought about, we needed to hit essentially a restart button. And as a facilitator, Francis had talked about when you don't know each other to start with introductions for relationship building. And I realized we needed to restart that, even though everybody knew one another. And so what I did was that first meeting of, you have a new facilitator, you're restarting, I thought about an icebreaker like Francis was saying, where I got at the shared values, you know, what are your commonalities? And the idea was to build empathy in the group and an understanding that they were all working from the same place in their heart, even if they disagreed about the solution. So in their case, I thought everybody involved has a relationship with the species they're trying to save, which is salmon. So I asked them to go deep and come to this first meeting and talk about their first memory with salmon. And I didn't realize this when I came up with it, but everyone had a childhood memory of fishing with an elder. You know, it was a father, a grandfather, in some cases a different elder in their tribe, and they looked at each other differently. Like, we all started our work in this area for that same reason. So it really changed it so that they were no longer attacking the person, but they were attacking the policy solution instead. So it was a way to eliminate the personal attacks and really just focus on the issues. That's all, Frances.
Thanks, Liz. I just want to share one more thing about icebreakers before we move on, and just to do a little bit of vulnerability. When Liz and I first came up with this training, the icebreaker we were going to have y'all do in the breakout rooms was, what is a great meal you had this week? Because that's, I know we like to talk about food a lot in our organization with each other and share recipes and all that. But you know, we actually realized that that could be potentially a really insensitive question to CBOs or just members of the communities coming onto this call, just because, you know, so many people have lost their jobs due to COVID, people who already have been experiencing, you know, food insecurity before this pandemic. And so it's just so important that as a facilitator, you take responsibility for your participants as much as you can, and have really sensitive and just inclusive and thoughtful icebreakers or questions that you ask people, just thinking about who your audience is and what might be going on in their lives. So that's all I'll say about intros and icebreakers. Do you have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if there's anything else that's unclear or anything you need us to clarify.
Great, thank you, Frances. I'm going to talk now, just talk about agendas, and then I'll go into the middle of the meeting. But you will, any of you who are looking at the clock will go, whoa, they haven't even gotten into the meeting part when you're in the middle of the meeting. And that's why I was here, because we have these challenging people who disrupt our meetings. And I have done a lot of train the trainer, like train facilitators. And I always say, well begun is halfway done if you're a facilitator. And the way you start the meeting has such a huge impact in terms of reducing the bumps in the road in the middle of the meeting. And that's why we always spend the most time talking about the beginning, and second, talking about how you close and send people off into the world, and the least amount on the middle part, which is where most of us think about when we think about facilitation. It's simply because if the bookends are good, you'll eliminate a lot of the bumpiness in the middle. In case you're wondering, going, are they going to finish on time? Because the biggest part is yet to come. And I'm here to say that's the smallest part. So you received from Alan in the a day or so before an agenda from us, and it may be a little different from agendas you've seen before. And it's not just we have to stick the Zoom meeting information in there, but if you looked at the second page, you'll see there were community agreements. So I'm going to talk about community agreements, and I'm going to talk about another part of our agenda, which I don't see very often on agendas, and that is what Frances did at the beginning, which is they talked about the purpose, outcomes, and process. So we'll talk about that as well. So with an agenda, the reason we send them out early is many of the groups resource media works with, English may not be the dominant language of all the members, the main language spoken of all the members. And you can either translate your agendas and have them in multiple languages, or if you just send them out in English language, it gives people a more equitable opportunity to process the agenda ahead of time. I am really big as a facilitator in thinking about the different participation styles of introverts and extroverts. I'm an introvert and I have a harder time in the middle of a meeting doing this popcorn style, if you've heard that word, where people just shout out their ideas and everybody's contributing in real time. I do better if I have an agenda in advance where maybe the facilitator will say, in a way that favors introverts, please come to the meeting with 1 or 2 or 3 ideas on agenda item 4. And I can have that time to process in a less raucous atmosphere. So I want to share with you that sending an agenda in advance helps folks who participate in different ways to really have the time to think about things. The other way is that if you have people who try to take you off your agenda in the middle of a meeting, or people who you might secretly in your head call them the disruptors, the disruptive people, is if you put a call out for agenda items a few days before, and then you have a set agenda coming into the meeting, if anybody tries to take you off the agenda, that agenda is your way that makes it not personal. When you say, we're not going to talk about that today, you just refer them back to an agenda. Without an agenda, you don't have that. It becomes this personal, like, well, they don't like me. They don't want my agenda item. So I think, Francis, probably the last thing I'll say about agendas is that people can be disruptive because they're uncomfortable not knowing where the group is going. And it's really disorienting for people if I, as the facilitator, am the only one who knows what's going to happen next. And so with an agenda, you're giving everybody the same roadmap. Everybody knows where you're going. So with that, I'll just say, you saw we had 3 agenda items. That's all. And the idea is you don't pack your agendas too tightly and give people more room for discussion. So POP is the next thing we'll talk about. This is the purpose, outcomes, and process. And Francis modeled that for us at the beginning. And that's a way to be really clear about why you're in the room. Particularly if it's just relationship building, where people who are action oriented and they're like, why aren't we doing anything? You can say, the purpose of this is just to build trust and connection. That's why there's nothing really on our agenda. But if you absolutely have to leave that meeting, for example, with a decision on whether you're going to hire a new staffer, you set that, that's the main purpose of the meeting. We can talk about other things, but we cannot do anything until we do that. And so in that case, if that's your purpose, but you say have several other agenda items, I would say put the big important decisions at the beginning so you know you'll get to them. And at the beginning of the meeting, people's energy levels are the highest. So if it's controversial or important, put it near the beginning so you have enough time and you're capturing people when their energy, I should say their constructive energy is at its highest. Desired outcomes, we'll share some examples of that, but it would be, say, did you come up with 3 ideas for themes for your half-day virtual summer camp or something like that. And the process is really explaining to people, and I'll go into this later with decision making, how you're gonna make those decisions, whether it's breakout rooms or a majority vote or something like that. So next we'll talk about community agreements, and we'll send you a copy of Resource Media's, even though it is in your on the back side of your agenda. I used to call these ground rules until I realized that's really authoritarian and that's like a dictatorship, meaning these are our rules. And I really want the groups I work with to have a shared community agreement about how we behave so that I don't have to be the one bringing down the hammer of these are the ground rules I set, but instead when it's a community agreement, each of us in the meeting can call each other in. So we'll send out a copy of this, but I want to note a lot of this was developed with power dynamics in mind, and it's really, really equity focused. So if you're looking to add more in there for your own community agreements that are equity focused, some of our staff really kept adding to this over a year where we thought of that. The first one, I will say in the pandemic, this is pre-pandemic, be present. We, Francis and Sharon and I did a training a couple months ago. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the pandemic. There were a lot of people on the line who had small living spaces with a lot of people running underfoot, literally like little toddlers. And this was a trigger for one of the people there when I think I was the one who listed out, I just said, here's 3 examples, be present, and a step up, step back. And with be present, I said, you know, I don't want to be a dictator, but I usually say, if you're tempted to put your phone away and you have trouble, just like stick it in another room, or, you know, whatever it takes to not check email. And this other participant said, you know, hearing the request to be present during the pandemic is a trigger for me because I cannot be fully present. And it just reminds me that I cannot be fully present and I've got kids underfoot. And so I really took that to heart and thought one of the ways to address that during this time, especially where everyone's working in a typically more distracting situation, is to just ask each other to give each other grace, because everybody has something in the background noise or whatnot. So now I think we are getting close enough to the top of the hour. Yes, we are exactly at the top of the hour. And so this is 2/3 of the way through the 90 Sharon. I'm like, I took your lines away. It's like, I took your job. I'm sorry. You can call time. I'll do it. I'm sorry for you. Don't take the timekeeper's job away from them. But this is either a 90-minute meeting for everyone, or it's a 2-hour meeting for those of you who want to stay an extra half hour to talk through your own challenges or share some of your solutions in the past. But I would say at this time, acknowledging people have been sitting in their chair for a long time, is to take a minute to just stretch. And sometimes we turn our cameras off, and well, I should just say, I'll model this for you all, is if you want to turn your camera off for a minute, fill your teacup, take a bio break, please feel free to do so. I'll stay on camera, and I'm going to do a stretch while sitting. So sometimes we've asked people to turn their camera off and stand up, and we have been called in by our coworkers. 2 of our coworkers are working with a disability justice group. We're in conversation with them, and it was a good reminder for us that not everybody has the same mobility issues. So as a facilitator, simply to model, you're going to stretch while sitting, is a great way to do that. So I'm going to turn my camera off, and everyone can do as you wish. I'm going to keep talking for those of you who aren't leaving your desk. And one of the things I want to talk about is how I do this break if our group has been having a tough conversation or a heated conversation. Instead of stretching, which is a great way to calm yourself down if you're feeling really hot emotions, is that I will ask the group to do some centering and some deep breathing And I'll either walk them through that with a breathe in and then holding it and then breathing out, or I will not. I will just be silent and ask people to take several deep breaths before we come together again. Thank you, everyone. So a great time to pause in the middle. If you do have group disagreements and it's not at the top of the hour, as it is for us, sometimes I will ask everybody to just take a break, just like you would do in an in-person meeting, where sometimes you'll see a facilitator say, I think now is a good time for us to take a break, walk around, breathe, whatever you need to do. So considering that as well. And I will go through some more ways to cool down hot conversations later, but I do want to actually talk about a little bit more about decision making for you all. And with the clean water plan, of course, CBOs, all of you are engaging with your communities or will be soon to gather input on water quality priorities. And of course, that ask will change as the Clean Water Plan progresses. But as a meeting facilitator, as decision makers, you may simply want to gather feedback, comments, ideas, concerns, suggestions, critiques. But at this point, I'm going to talk about where broader, because we want to use this time to help you with all of your work where you have to make decisions in a virtual setting and you can't all be like hands raised in the room. So Sharon, thank you for putting up this slide. This is really something at the beginning of the meeting. And again, I'm showing you how important it is to establish all this legwork at the beginning of the meeting to make sure the rest flows. So before you actually describe a decision that needs to be made, be really clear. So it's sort of like when you're playing a board game and somebody explains a new rule you weren't aware of in the middle of the game, and people are like, you can't change the rules in the middle of the game. So at the beginning, you may say, we're going to cover this, this, and this is how we'll make today's decision. And a lot of this, you all know by heart that you can say majority, like 51% plus, and that decision is made, or it's consensus driven, or it's 80% in favor, whatever it might be. But online, since not everybody has a camera on, you can't do the raise your hand or unmute yourself. Makes it really hard to know when you do it verbally and you can't see people who said yes, who said no. And so Francis is going to show us now, Francis, if you don't mind, how to do a virtual poll. And those of you who are able to on your screen can do a vote now, and we'll send instructions for how to do this afterwards if you haven't done it already. So Francis, if you want to run that poll.
Sure. So as the host, you can launch polls, and you can either create one on the fly, or after you set up your meeting, you can in the Zoom browser, you can set up a poll, so it's already there and loaded. So to launch the poll as a host, I have a button that says polling. I'm going to click on it. It's going to show me the polls I have, and I'm going to launch the poll, which is what I'm doing now. So this poll's question is, have you ever facilitated a meeting over Zoom before? And you should see three answers: yes, no, and sure. Go ahead and click the one that speaks to you.
And while you're voting, Refugio Mata has joined us, and he'll be doing the Spanish language version of this in a week or so. a week or 2 weeks. So thank you, Refugio, for joining us. And Sonia, I see you've joined us as well from King County, so I want to welcome you as well to our meeting.
All right, now I'm gonna click end poll and then show you the results. So you should be able to see the breakdown on the screen. For everyone in this meeting, have you ever facilitated a meeting over Zoom before? 82% or 9 people said yes, 2 people or 18% said no.
Nice, thank you. So that's a quantitative vote where it's a really clear yes, no answer. You'll see nobody wrote unsure whether they facilitated or not, but a lot of your meeting discussions aren't gonna be as simple as I'm in favor or I'm against, or yes, I've done that. No, I haven't. There's a lot more nuance, especially if you're trying to hash out if your organization is going to take a position on something that has come from the city of Kent or King County or the state, or from other community groups asking if you'll sign on to a resolution, and there needs to be discussion. So I wanted to share with you all a way that we do that at Resource Media that's not invented by Resource Media, but is out there among facilitators, and it's Fist to 5. And if anybody's done this, I'd be curious, definitely put it in chat if you've used this before. This is what I like to call quality voting, not quantity voting, where people can visually, or they can type in chat, or you can run a digital poll with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or a 0. And the fist essentially means that you object, and you may even block any efforts on consensus the way something has been presented. People typically do that in our world that we operate on moral grounds. 1 finger, this is basically, I don't like this, but it's not quite a no, that you might think there's a lot more work to do on the proposal. And 2 fingers is essentially you don't like it, but you're gonna go along. You know, there's a lot of nuance here, but you have some questions you wanna discuss some more. 3, you're clearly in the middle. You like some of it, but not all of it. 4 is surprisingly, like, I would put this at a 5, but the way Fist to 5 is written, that's fine. And 5 is really the full-on enthusiastic, I love this, let's do this. You know, you're first in line to volunteer. For me as a facilitator, the value of this, I cannot even underscore how helpful this is. If I see 10 out of 14 people with 1s or 2s or fists, right? As a facilitator, all of a sudden I'm going, oh, this isn't a 10-minute agenda item. This may take the rest of the meeting if our outcome is to come to a decision and we have some, the other folks are 4 or 5, like they want to go with this. This gives you an instant read of how much time you need to be spending on this to either get consensus or to drop it. So thank you, Sharon, for that. Did we get any chats that anybody, nope, nobody's used it. So I'll send a link to a page so you don't have to take notes on this. So I'm gonna spend the rest of my time talking about 3 facilitation techniques for that infamous middle of the meeting, where the reason all of us have gone to facilitation trainings is because of these moments that we will never forget, where we were like, how do I deal with this person? Playback. So I have a story about this. My brother-in-law is a city council member on the East Coast, and he and I were talking about this, maybe it was last year or 2 years ago. And I asked him how his work was doing. You know, there's a lot of discussion about sewers and utilities and whatnot, and potholes with his community. But he talked about how he had, and other council members had this challenge where there would be regular folks who would come to every single city council meeting, and then when they would ask questions about the different proposals, these people would stand up and they would talk, and they would talk, sometimes about the topic at hand, sometimes not. And he is such a fervent believer in public participation. But second, he was aware how he handled those people so that the meeting didn't go till 11:30 at night had a direct effect on how others who were attending for the first time or just attended a few of them about a very specific agenda item, whether they would ever show up again. So it wasn't just about how do you handle that person, but how do you encourage positive participation from everybody else who interacted differently. And what he realized that I've really taken to heart is that everyone at your meeting is part of your group. They volunteer with your group, whatever reason, they're there, and they need to leave that meeting having felt seen and having felt heard, whatever that means for them. And these same people who show up, and you sometimes hear the term, they're the gadfly, that person, and it's always like, they're so annoying, they take up so much airtime. They're there because this is a place that the door cannot close for them. And it's a place for them to be seen. Some of them are lonely. And in my brother-in-law's case, he knows they're senior citizens. This is the only place they can go to where people have to listen to them legally. And so what he has done to ensure that they do feel seen and heard is he finds a good moment for the playback where he gently interrupts them, and without minimizing any inference, he restates, rephrases, shows that he understands what they're saying, and says, let me restate what you just said so that I'm sure I understand you. And then he closes that discussion in a way that ensures that they understand that they've been heard, and more importantly, sends a signal to everybody else in the room that each of their opinions are valued. So the switchback is so if you're driving up a hill and it's really steep, you're going back and forth, conversations and meetings can happen like that, where Amina may take you from A to B, which is, yay, you're doing great, you're going this way, you're trying to go this way. But then a man named John comes and takes your discussion in a different direction, and it's going off track. And instead of you saying, John, you're taking our conversation off track, you would say, find something in there that related to what Amina said, and you'd say, John, what you just said relates to what Amina mentioned earlier around X, whatever it is, which brings us back to, and it's a way again of acknowledging what he said, but you as facilitator are keeping you moving in the straight line. Pause and wait. This goes back to what Francis and I were talking about, introverts and extroverts, and this idea that you wait 7 seconds on an online meeting because you cannot read people's body language. If somebody's just getting ready to say something but is waiting, please let somebody else speak first. What I do is, if I've, say, Joycelyn, Alan, Eunice have been participating a lot, and I've heard from them. When I ask a question and I pause, and people maybe use I'm going to do a reaction sign, like I say thumbs up if you want to ask a question, and I say, okay, I'm not going to call on Joycelyn, Eunice, Alan again. And let's say Francis is raising their hand for the first time. I would wait 7 seconds, and then I would say, Francis, you haven't spoken, so why don't you offer a comment on this? So that allows me to call on people, not the first person who raises their hand virtually, but on call on the people who haven't yet had a chance to speak. So it's really a way to allow more hands virtually to go up in the air. So now I want to talk about something I learned from the Apple store. Their customer service manual was posted online a couple years ago. You know, the people that come into the Genius Bar and they're like, my computer is broken, this, that, and the other, and they're very agitated because they need their computer desperately. Deadlines are looming. And it's very similar to other customer service manuals. And I thought, these big companies with their big budgets have definitely studied customer psychology, and there's lessons for us with meetings where people are frustrated about something. Why haven't we done something about X or Y? And when I looked at it, I realized there's a commonality that I'm seeing, because it sent me down the internet rabbit hole of what are other customer service manuals. How do they de-escalate situations when somebody's upset with your company, or in the case with your group? What do they do? As a facilitator, I want to know. And what I realized is the number one rule is empathy for the person who's upset. It's not how do I get control of this situation first. It's how do I deliver empathy to this person first? And that's how you de-escalate. And what it came down to is, even if the person, say in the case of Apple, it was a very simple solution, they just hadn't looked at the manual, is you don't say no. No, you need to be doing this. And the reason is this other area that Sharon and Francis and I have to spend a lot of time looking at in our work, and that's around the cognitive science of communication. And that is that when you as a human hear the word no, something very different happens in your brain than when you hear the word yes. And in effect, brain science says when we hear no but, it is somebody not acknowledging essentially our worldview, right? And your brain, the rational thinking part of your brain that we all want to activate in the meeting with our participants, shuts down, and fight or flight happens. And that's when you see people, when they're shut down, I have to turn my camera down, arms are crossed in a real meeting, or you see them withdraw. They stop speaking and engaging in an online meeting, or you've seen this in person. If instead you say yes, not in terms of yes, I agree with you, but yes, your point is well taken, and then you offer a different solution, you have a very different reaction in the other person, because A, they've been seen and heard, and you are working with them to find a solution that's agreeable to the group. So I want to share, the corporate sector does have a few lessons, but in closing my section is that sometimes none of what I said will work with your group. And you may be sitting here going, I've tried all those things, Liz, and they don't work with the meeting of the this people or the that people. And then I say, that's all right. You can close a meeting and say, we didn't come to consensus. Let's agree to disagree, or let's assign this to a smaller task force to hash this out. Let's give this decision to 4 people who represent different constituencies, or in some other way, just pull back from a stressful situation and say this clearly merits more discussion. Let's tackle this again at the next meeting, and here's how I will do things differently. The most important thing though is if you don't, as a facilitator, get that consensus and you say we're going to stop the discussion, your final responsibility is to be very clear before people disband from the virtual meeting to say, here's how we will either come to a consensus or drop this idea. So I want to ask, are there any questions or solutions that you have. And I'm gonna let those come through, and I'm also gonna pass the baton to Francis to talk about good meeting closers. And so we'll have that pause, and Francis will regroup us for that closing.
Thanks so much, Liz. And if folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well when I'm talking. Okay, so we are near the end of our meeting, which is great because I'm going to close it by talking about some options and how you might close your meeting. So thank you, Sharon, for the slides. So just going to go through this list. How to close, you can review. So just review with folks what happened during this meeting. What decisions did you make? What did you learn? Maybe who has been assigned what tasks and by when will they be done? You can also do a preview of what's going to happen next. So now that we did this, next we're going to do this in our next meeting. You can do a big view, which is, okay, here's what we did in this meeting, but how does this fit in the larger picture of why we're here together and what we're committed to, and what are our goals for this year, and so forth. You can celebrate a success. Wow, we reached consensus on this decision, or this great thing happened in our organization. Woohoo! You can offer acknowledgement and gratitude for folks who participated or did some extra legwork to make this meeting happen, and then lay out next steps. I think that's the same as preview. So are there any questions about the closing section? Okay, so just gonna do a quick time check. Okay, there's just one more exercise that I want us to do together, and it's going to be kind of in line with what Liz was saying, just something that favors an introvert's processing style. Is not really about like rapidly responding to question. So I'm gonna give you the instructions and then we'll do the exercise. So I'd like each of you to individually reflect for 1 minute on how you might want to close your meeting, or just reflect on what you've heard during this training and write down some techniques or skills that you think you might want to use in your next meeting. You can turn your video off, and I'll see you back. I'll see you back in 1 minute.
And Francis, I want to just add one quick thing, that this has been really important for Resource Media when we're working with groups where members have historically been pushed to the side. Their voices haven't been heard, that this addresses power dynamics in the room to allow people to non-verbally reflect. So thanks for doing this exercise.
Okay, thanks everyone for doing that exercise. You can just go ahead and wrap up whatever sentence or thought you're having. And we are going to end this recording.